At 60, I thought I'd seen every kind of rejection. I was wrong. Standing at the entrance of the care home, paperwork trembling in my hand, my only son looked me straight in the eye and said, "You didn't raise me. Why should I help you?" The words sliced through me sharper than any deal I'd ever lost. In that single moment, decades of boardroom victories felt meaningless. I had spent 40 years chasing promotions, building my empire, and telling myself it was all for the family. I had the penthouse, the Mercedes, the corner office. But I couldn't remember the last time my son had called me Dad without a trace of bitterness. I had missed his birthdays, his graduations, even his wedding. I thought money would bridge the gap. I didn't realize every absence was building a wall I could no longer climb. As I stood there, humiliated in front of strangers, I realized the truth. I wasn't just asking for a signature on a form. I was asking for something far more expensive. His trust, and I had nothing left to bargain with. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. If there was even the smallest chance to rebuild what I had destroyed, I would take it. I didn't know how or if he'd ever let me in again, but I was about to risk everything. This time, not for a contract or a client, but for my family. I was born in a town where ambition was a luxury nobody could afford. My father died when I was 12. And my mother stitched clothes late into the night just to keep the lights on. Every bill was a battle, every meal a small victory. I swore to myself, standing in that dim kitchen, that I would never be poor again. That vow carried me through college, where I studied finance like my life depended on it, because in many ways, it did. I worked 2 part-time jobs, slept in 4-hour shifts, and devoured textbooks as if each page was a ticket out of the life I was born into. The day I graduated, I wasn't just walking across a stage, I was crossing a line from scarcity into possibility. My first job in banking was humble, but I treated it like it was the corner office. I came in earlier than everyone else, left later than the janitors, memorized every client file. My boss once told me, "You work like you're starving." I smiled, because he didn't know how close that was to the truth. It was during those early years that I met Anna. She was radiant, calm where I was restless, grounded where I was driven. We married in a small ceremony, promising each other a life of love, stability, and shared dreams. I meant every word. But the thing about ambition is that it doesn't sit quietly. It grows. The bank noticed my work. Promotions came, each with a little more money, a little more responsibility. And with each step forward, I told Anna, "This is for us, for the future." In those early days, there were signs I was choosing work over home. Late dinners gone cold, missed movie nights, weekends sacrificed for urgent reports. But I always framed it as temporary. Once I reach the next position, I'd say, we'll finally have the life we talked about. Anna believed me. So did I. When our son Michael was born, I thought I'd reached the pinnacle. Holding him in that hospital room, I promised silently. He would never know the struggles I endured, but promises are easier to make than to keep. The first cracks appeared quietly, almost invisibly. My schedule grew heavier. The bank expanded, and I was at the center of high-value deals. My days stretched into nights, my weekends into conference calls. At first, Anna adapted. She managed the household, sent me pictures of Michael's milestones, assured me we were fine. But the truth was there, hiding in plain sight. Michael's first birthday was the same week as a critical client negotiation. "I'll be there," I told Anna. "I'll make it work." But the deal ran late, and I arrived home to find wrapping paper in the trash and frosting smeared on the high chair. Anna smiled weakly, saying, "We saved you a slice." I told myself it was just one birthday. The following year, there was his first Christmas pageant at preschool. Michael was going to play a shepherd. I had the date marked, the time blocked out, but the day before, a client threatened to pull out of a multi-million-dollar agreement. My presence was absolutely necessary. I convinced myself that missing the pageant was the responsible choice. On the evening of the performance, I sat in a conference room under fluorescent lights, while my son stood on a stage in a paper costume, scanning the crowd for me. Later, Anna showed me a shaky video on her phone. Michael's little face looked uncertain, his eyes lingering on the empty seat where I should have been. I told myself it was just this once. I told myself there would be other pageants, other chances. But deep down, I felt the faint sting of something I couldn't name, something that would grow sharper with time. Anna never yelled, never accused. Her silence was heavier than any argument. She stopped asking if I could make certain events. She simply told me when they were, and when I inevitably missed them, she would say, "It's fine." I convinced myself she understood, that they both did, that my absences were sacrifices for a better future. I didn't see what was really happening, that each, just this once, was becoming a pattern. Each absence another brick in the wall quietly rising between me and my family. Looking back, I realized those moments weren't isolated. They were the beginning of a story I wouldn't want told at my funeral. At first, I thought my absence was a burden they simply endured. I imagined my family counting the days until I could spend more time at home. But the truth was much colder. They weren't waiting. They were adapting. Anna became the anchor of the household. She paid bills, fixed leaky faucets, attended every school meeting, and helped with every science project. I wasn't so much a husband or father as I was a line item in the budget, someone who funded the life they lived without me. Michael grew older, and without my presence, sought guidance elsewhere. It wasn't malicious, it was survival. The man who lived next door, Tom, was a retired firefighter. He taught Michael how to throw a baseball, fix a bike chain, and grill burgers on summer weekends. I would come home from business trips to find Michael chatting excitedly with Tom on the porch. When he saw me, the excitement in his voice would flatten into politeness. "Hey, Dad," he'd say, before going back to whatever he was doing. I told myself Tom was just being a good neighbor. I told myself it was fine for Michael to have more role models. But deep down, it felt like someone else was filling a role I'd quietly abandoned. The realization hit harder during what Anna called a small family catch-up one Sunday afternoon. I walked into the living room where Anna and Michael were flipping through a photo album, laughing, sharing stories. "Come sit," Anna said, sliding the album toward me. I flipped through page after page of birthdays, school plays, summer trips, and then I saw it. A picture from Michael's 8th birthday. He was grinning, leaning over a cake, and right beside him, holding the knife, was Tom. "Where was I?" I asked, though I already knew. "You were in Chicago," Anna said gently. "The firm needed you for that merger." I stared at the photo. It wasn't just the image of Tom cutting the cake. It was Michael's eyes. He wasn't looking for me in that picture. He wasn't expecting me to be there. Years passed, and the events I missed began to blur together. I was always on a plane, always in a meeting, always just one trip away from being home. Anna stopped telling me about some of them. She would mention in passing that there'd been a school play, or that Michael had won a regional competition, as if they were minor details. I should have noticed that the invitations stopped coming. There were no more printed programs left on my desk. No more reminders slipped into my suitcase. I didn't realize it wasn't forgetfulness. It was resignation. Michael's high school graduation was the breaking point, though at the time, I didn't see it that way. I was in Hong Kong negotiating a deal I believed would secure our future forever. I had promised Anna I'd be back in time. My return flight was booked, but the meeting extended by just one more day. I called Anna from the hotel, my voice filled with excuses I believed were valid. "I'll make it up to him," I said. "Chatiyati, he's stopped expecting you, David," she replied. The next day, while Michael walked across that stage in his cap and gown, I was sitting in a glass conference room half a world away. I received a photo later, Michael smiling with his diploma in hand, Anna standing proudly beside him. My absence wasn't mentioned. A few weeks later, Anna asked me to meet her at a cafe. I thought it was about vacation plans or family logistics. Instead, she looked at me across the table with calm, steady eyes. "I think we should get a divorce," she said. The words hit like a physical blow. "Anna, why? Is there someone else?" She shook her head. "No, this isn't about another person. It's about us. I love you, David, but I think we've both been living a lie. You've been married to your work for years. I've been holding a place for someone who doesn't come home." I reached for her hand, desperate. "We can fix this. I can change." She pulled back gently. "You don't need to change for me. You've built the life you wanted. I just don't want to keep being the anchor that's holding you from the career you've clearly chosen. I want you to be free. And maybe I need to be free too." It was a twist I never saw coming. I had expected anger, accusations, maybe even an ultimatum, but Anna wasn't angry. She wasn't leaving because she hated me. She was leaving because she had given up waiting for the man she married to come back. And in that moment, I realized something far worse than losing her love. I had lost her hope. Anna and I had been divorced for nearly 5 years when Michael announced he was getting married. By then, we spoke occasionally. Holidays, birthdays, obligatory phone calls where words felt like formalities. But when he told me about the wedding, there was a shift in his voice. "I want you to be there, Dad," he said. Those words lit a spark of hope I hadn't felt in years. "Of course I'll be there," I replied without hesitation. "No matter what, I'll be there." For once, I meant it without the shadow of conditions. In the months leading up to the ceremony, I marked the date on every calendar, declined overlapping engagements, and told my firm I was unavailable that weekend. I was determined. This time would be different. But then the call came. A long-term client in London was threatening to pull out of what could be my career's final, defining deal. My presence was essential. My team told me I could still make the wedding if everything went perfectly. I should have walked away. I should have chosen my son. But 40 years of instinct whispered otherwise. "Close the deal first, then go," I told myself. The meeting ran late. My return flight was delayed. I landed back in the States just as Michael and his bride were leaving the reception. Anna didn't answer my calls. Michael didn't either. 2 days later, a wedding photo surfaced on social media. It was a beautiful picture. Rows of smiling guests, the bride glowing, Michael beaming. But my eyes locked on a single detail. A chair at the front, empty, with a small sign that read, "Reserved for Dad." The image cut through me deeper than any argument could. It wasn't just a missing seat. It was the visual proof of everything I'd failed to be. Weeks passed before Michael agreed to see me. We met at a quiet bar, the kind of place where conversations don't need to compete with music. He sat across from me, his expression guarded. "I'm sorry," I began, but he held up a hand. "Don't," he said flatly. "And don't give me the same speech you've given my whole life. You were busy. It was important. You thought I'd understand." His voice was calm, but each word landed like a hammer. I faltered. "I wanted to be there. I tried." "Tried?" he cut in. "Do you have any idea how many times I've heard that? How many birthdays, games, graduations, you always tried. But trying isn't the same as being there." I opened my mouth, but he leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "Do you even know what happened when Mom finally couldn't handle it anymore?" I blinked, unsure what he meant. "When she left me." He laughed, but it was humorless. "She didn't just leave you. She broke down, Dad, completely. And you didn't notice because you were in Singapore or New York or wherever you were chasing your next deal. She couldn't take care of me for a while. So guess what happened?" The room felt smaller. What happened?" "I went to live with Aunt Karen for 6 months," he said, his voice tightening. "I was 12. She took me in because Mom couldn't. You never even knew, did you?" I sat frozen. My mind searched for any hint of that time, but there was nothing. I was thousands of miles away, sending money, thinking everything at home was fine. Michael's tone softened, but it cut even deeper. "Do you know what it's like to be a kid, watching every other dad show up, while yours sends postcards from business trips? Do you know what it's like to realize you don't even make the top 5 priorities in your father's life?" I couldn't answer, because the truth was brutal. I didn't know. He leaned back, exhaling. "I'm not telling you this to hurt you, Dad. I'm telling you because you need to understand why I didn't ask you for help with the wedding, why I don't ask you for much of anything. You chose your life, and I chose to stop waiting for you to show up." I sat there, my glass untouched, feeling decades of justifications collapse in on themselves. It wasn't just that I'd missed moments. I'd missed entire chapters of my son's life. The conversation ended without shouting, without drama, just a quiet acknowledgement that whatever bridge had once existed between us was now almost entirely gone. When I left the bar, the night air felt heavy. I had walked in thinking I could explain myself, maybe patch things over. I walked out realizing I didn't just have to apologize. I had to prove somehow that I could be a father before it was too late. The storm had broken. What came next would either wash away what little remained or start the slow work of rebuilding. In the weeks after that conversation at the bar, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every word Michael said, every moment I'd missed, every silent seat where I should have been. The image of that empty wedding chair haunted me. Something had to change. One morning, I walked into my office, a place that had defined me for 4 decades, and felt nothing. The floor-to-ceiling windows, the polished desk, the awards on the wall, they all seemed hollow. They were relics of a life that had cost me more than I could afford. I opened my laptop and typed my resignation. The firm's partners were stunned. "David, you're 2 years away from retiring at the peak. Why now?" "Because I don't want my obituary to be a list of deals," I said. I sold my house soon after. The big, echoing rooms felt like a museum of absence. Beautiful, but empty. I traded it for a modest 2-bedroom cottage in the small town where Michael lived. It was a place with no boardrooms, No late-night conference calls, just quiet streets and the faint hope that maybe I could still be part of my son's life. When Michael heard, he didn't react the way I'd imagined. "So, you quit your job? Sold the house?" His expression was skeptical. "Yes," I said. "I wanted a change. I wanted to be closer." He gave a short laugh. "Closer to me? Or closer to your savings account? Did something happen? Are you out of money?" It was like a punch I hadn't braced for. "No, Michael, this isn't about money." "Right," he said, unconvinced. "Because walking away from a 40-year career just happens overnight." I realized then that he didn't believe me. And why should he? My whole life I'd chosen work over him. A sudden change of scenery wasn't going to erase decades of absence. Still, I moved in, unpacked, and began my new life. It was humbling. No luxury car, no corporate dinners, just grocery shopping, cooking my own meals, and long walks through a quiet town. For the first time in years, my calendar was empty, and for the first time, that felt right. The uphill battle began slowly. I didn't push my way into Michael's life. I showed up quietly, offering help where I could. When he and his wife had their first child, I offered to babysit so they could have a night out. They hesitated, but eventually agreed, though it was more like a trial run than a gesture of trust. I sat on the living room floor, reading picture books to my granddaughter, feeling an odd mix of joy and sorrow. Joy because I was there. Sorrow because I knew how many times Michael had sat alone, waiting for me when he was her age. I started attending small events. His daughter's school fair, his wife's birthday dinner, the occasional barbecue. Sometimes I was invited, other times I just stopped by to drop something off. Each time I kept my expectations low. There were moments when I thought I saw a flicker of warmth in Michael's eyes, small acknowledgments that maybe I was trying. But trust, I realized, wasn't given. It was earned, one consistent act at a time. One day, out of the blue, Michael called. "Dad, we're having a family dinner Saturday. You should come." His voice was neutral, but I felt a surge of hope. Maybe this was progress. I arrived early, dressed simply, carrying a bottle of wine I knew he liked. The house was warm with conversation and laughter. His friends, his wife's family, neighbors, they were all there. Michael greeted me at the door, then disappeared into the crowd. I tried to mingle, but something felt off. No one seemed to expect me to contribute. Conversations carried on without me. I stood near the kitchen for most of the evening, occasionally refilling my glass, smiling when someone passed. Michael finally walked over. "You stayed the whole night," he said, almost surprised. "I told you I'd be here," I replied. For a moment, there was silence. Then he nodded, a small, almost imperceptible acknowledgement. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. That night, walking home, I realized the gamble wasn't about grand gestures or sudden declarations. It was about endurance. It was about proving, again and again, that I wouldn't walk away. Not from a dinner, not from a family, not from him. I had left my career, my home, my old life behind. Now I was here, in this small town, with nothing but time and the hope that I could still repair what I'd broken. The gamble was far from over, but for the first time I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was playing for something worth winning. Healing didn't come like a sudden sunrise. It came like winter thaw, slow, uneven, with stretches of cold even after the first signs of warmth. I kept showing up. Every school recital for my granddaughter, every barbecue, every Sunday dinner. Sometimes I was invited. Sometimes I just found a quiet way to help. Mowing their lawn when Michael was busy. Dropping off groceries when I noticed they were low. At first, Michael treated it like background noise. He didn't stop me, but he didn't acknowledge it either. I didn't press. I knew acknowledgement had to come from him, not from my asking. One afternoon, I was raking leaves outside my small cottage when Tom, the retired firefighter who'd once been more of a father to Michael than I was, walked by. "You're still at it, huh?" Tom said, leaning on the fence. "Trying to make up for lost time," I admitted. Tom studied me for a moment, then nodded. "You've changed, David. I didn't think you'd stick around this long. Guess I was wrong." I didn't know that Michael, walking home from work, had overheard those words. He didn't say anything at the time, but later I noticed something different in his eyes, a hesitation, as if he wasn't sure whether to lower his guard or keep it raised. Weeks passed, and the walls between us began to show cracks. Small moments slipped through. Michael asking if I could pick up his daughter from school, inviting me to help him with a home repair, casually leaving me in charge of the grill at a family cookout. None of these moments were grand, but they were trust in motion. One evening, I stopped by their house to drop off a casserole I'd made. Michael opened the door, glanced at the dish, and smirked. "You cook now?" "I'm full of surprises," I said. His wife appeared, smiling warmly. "Come in, David. We're just about to eat." It was the first time in years I'd been invited to sit at their table. The turning point came unexpectedly. It was a rainy Thursday evening when my phone rang. It was Michael, his voice tight. "It's Emily. She's in the hospital. Fever spiked. We're on our way." I didn't ask questions. I grabbed my coat and keys, and within minutes I was at the hospital. By the time Michael and his wife arrived, I was already there, speaking to the nurse, finding out which room Emily would be in. Michael saw me in the waiting room, surprise flashing across his face. "You're here already?" "Of course I'm here," I said simply. The hours that followed were tense. Tests, waiting, more tests. I stayed in the hallway, fetching coffee, talking to doctors when Michael and his wife were too stressed to focus. Around midnight, the doctor came out to say Emily would be fine. It was a bad infection, but she was responding to treatment. The relief on Michael's face was palpable. He sank into a chair, running a hand over his face. Then he looked at me. "You didn't have to be here so fast," he said quietly. "Yes, I did," I replied, "because I missed too many nights like this when it mattered. I'm not missing anymore." Michael didn't answer right away, but there was no skepticism in his eyes, no test I had to pass. Just a quiet, tired acknowledgement. In the weeks after Emily's recovery, things changed in ways I hadn't dared hope for. Michael began calling me without a reason, just to chat, or to ask about a recipe, or to see if I wanted to watch a game together. His wife invited me to Sunday dinners without the formal, "if you're free." The air felt different now, less like I was being tolerated, more like I was part of the rhythm of their lives. It wasn't perfect. There were still shadows of old wounds, unspoken moments when I could feel the weight of the past in the room. But we were no longer pretending there was no bridge. We were walking across it together, step by step. One Sunday evening, as I was leaving their house, Michael walked me to the door. "You've been different these past few years," he said, almost cautiously. I met his eyes. "I had to be. I owed it to you. I still do." For a moment, he didn't reply. Then he nodded. "Well, I'm glad you stayed. It wasn't a grand declaration. It wasn't a full absolution, but it was real. And it was enough. Time has a way of reframing everything. I used to think my legacy would be the deals I closed, the companies I built, the balance sheets I perfected. Now, I understand that none of it matters if no one is there to remember me. Not for what I earned, but for who I was. One autumn afternoon, I sat with Michael on his back porch. The leaves were turning gold, the air carrying that crisp smell that makes you aware of how short each season really is. We watched his daughter play in the yard, her laughter spilling into the quiet between us. You know, I said, I used to think success was about never stopping, always climbing, always reaching for the next thing. But now, I think it's about knowing when to stop climbing and turn around to see who's still there. Michael didn't answer right away. His gaze followed his daughter as she ran to the fence, calling for the dog. I spent so much time making sure you'd never struggle like I did, I continued, and in the process, I forgot the one thing that mattered most, being there. Money can't buy back birthdays. Promotions can't replace bedtime stories. I can't undo what I missed, but I can try to make sure you never repeat my mistakes. There was a long pause. Then Michael turned to me, his expression softer than I'd ever seen it. Dad, he said, I've been thinking. The kids love having you around. And I think it'd be easier for everyone if you just lived here. Not because you need help, but because they want their grandpa close. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I had dreamed of being closer, but never dared hope he'd ask. Are you sure? He smiled faintly. Yeah, not because of obligation. Because it feels right. That was the moment I knew the years of effort had led to something real, not a performance, not a probation period, but a place in his life again. Living with Michael's family was nothing like the life I once knew, but everything I needed. Mornings started with pancakes, not conference calls. Afternoons meant school runs and trips to the park, not endless meetings. Evenings were loud and messy, full of laughter, spilled juice, and the occasional argument over homework. I watched Michael with his children, and I saw the ripple of change. He took time off work for school plays. He coached his son's soccer team. He never said maybe next time when they asked for his attention. I like to think my mistakes taught him something, if only by showing him what not to do. One night, after the kids were asleep, Michael and I sat in the kitchen sipping tea. You know, he said quietly, I used to think I'd never forgive you. I met his eyes, waiting. But I see you now, he continued. Not just showing up, staying, and I get it. You thought you were doing the right thing back then. I'm glad you're here now. I want my kids to grow up knowing the version of you I know today. It was the closest thing to a full pardon I'd ever receive, and it was enough. Years passed, and life settled into a rhythm I never imagined for myself. I grew older, my hair turning white, my steps slower. One winter morning, after a particularly bad bout of flu, my doctor gently suggested I consider moving into a care home. The old me would have resisted, would have seen it as surrender. But I had learned that letting people in was its own form of strength. Michael drove me to the care home for a tour. As we stood in the lobby, I felt a strange echo of the day years ago when he had refused to sign me in. The nurse handed Michael the admission forms. He took the pen, looked at me, and smiled. You raised me now, Dad, he said, his voice steady. For a moment, my chest tightened, not with pain, but with a deep, quiet gratitude. He signed the papers, not out of duty, but out of love. In the months that followed, Michael visited often, sometimes with the kids, sometimes just to sit with me. We talked about the past, the present, the future. We laughed at old mistakes, shared quiet moments of understanding. I realized then that my legacy wasn't in the buildings I'd worked in, the clients I'd won, or the titles I'd held. It was in the afternoons I spent reading to my granddaughter, in the soccer games I watched from the sidelines, in the simple fact that my family knew I was there. And as I looked around at the life I had now, messy, imperfect, but full, I knew that for all the years I had lost, the ones I had left were worth everything.